If an argument is deductively valid and premises are true, the conclusion is true. Such an argument can be formulated for a first cause creator. And here I present a 13 steps cosmological argument. Premise one, if something, say X, begins uncaused, then some other things, such as Y, which begin or could begin to exist around us, would also begin uncaused. Why? Because firstly, there will be no cause that makes it the case that only X rather than Y begins uncaused. Secondly, the properties of X and the properties of Y, which differentiate between them, would only be had by them only when they have already begun to exist. And thirdly, the circumstance around us is compatible with the beginning of Y. And so these 3 points imply that there will be no difference between X and Y where beginning to exist uncaused is concerned. Okay, and therefore, if X begins uncaused, Y would also begin uncaused. But it is not the case that Y begin uncaused, right? So Y could be, say, for example, a sudden increase in strength of electric field around us. No, we don't experience that suddenly begin to uncaused and killing us, right? And therefore, it is not the case that something begin uncaused. So this is a modus tollens argument, right? So I've already explained why the premises are true, and therefore the conclusion is true. So the conclusion implies that whatever begins to exist is dependent on cause to make it the case that is, say, for example, X rather than Y that begin to exist. And I call this the causal principle. Given the causal principle, I then go on to show that there exists a series of cause and effects and changes. So for example, I begin to exist, I came from my parents came from their parents, etc. Now, this series either has an infinite regress that avoids the first cause, or its members, so either it's infinite or it's finite. If it's finite, then either the members are joined together like a closed loop that avoids the first cause, or the series has a first cause. And then in my publications, I show that it's not the case that it's an infinite regress or a closed loop. And in fact, there are multiple arguments for these two premises, such as the argument from the viciousness of dependence regress, which is based on the causal principle, which basically shows that things which beginning of existence are dependent on causes. Now, there cannot be an infinite regress or a closed loop of dependent relations. Just as if, say, for example, if I have no money and depend on Daniel to give me money, but Daniel also have no money but depend on Cameron, if everyone is like this, right, no one will ever begin to have money. What is required is somebody who is a first source of the money, right? So likewise, I argue that there must be a first cause of existence. There must be an independent first cause. Now, since that is the case, we need to ask what is the first cause. Okay. Now, since the first cause is the first, it must be uncaused. And since whatever begins to exist as a cause, the first cause must be without beginning. And since every change is an event, I define a change as an event, right, which has a beginning as something or part of a thing gain or lose a property. The beginningless first cause is not a change or event, right? It is not an event such as, for example, the Big Bang. Rather, it is something that is initially changeless. And by initial, I refer to as the first in the series of states ordered causally, not first in the series of changes, events, or temporal state series. Now, in order for the initially changeless first cause to cause the first change or effect or event, regardless of whether it's a Big Bang or whatever, from an initially changeless state, the first cause must have the capacity to originate the first event in a way that is undetermined by prior events, since the first cause is the first. And moreover, it must also have the capacity to prevent itself from changing. Otherwise, it wouldn't be existing initially changelessly and beginninglessly without the event or change. And these two capacities imply that the first cause has libertarian freedom, which implies that it is a personal creator. Okay, so I've already shown that there is a personal creator of the universe, which is what I mean by God.